As you can probably see, 2017 has been a huge year for smartphones. We've seen a shift towards bezel-less displays, even on smartphones costing less than $200. USB Type-C has become the dominant port of choice, and as sad as it is to admit, the headphone jack is on the way out. So welcome to our top 20 smartphones of 2017. And this list is a little bit different, because as well as just featuring the flagship phones like most other conventional lists might do, we've got budget phones and we've got imported phones. So in a sense, we've got a slightly wider perspective on what makes a good smartphone. The way I've organised this list, just so it makes a little bit more sense, is that the first 15 phones are going to be in no particular order. These are almost like the honourable mentions, the really great smartphones that just didn't quite make the top 5, but then within the top 5, I will list first, second, third, fourth and fifth. So, the first smartphone here is the Meizu Pro 7 Plus, and I love the innovation here. The second screen on the rear of the phone is a really cool and sometimes useful feature to have. It allows you to use the dual rear cameras to effectively take selfies with. Unfortunately, it hasn't garnered much third-party support, and so it's tough to recommend it as something really useful. The Oukitel K10000 Pro is a smartphone with a 10,000 mAh battery inside. And to give you some perspective, that is over 3 times what the average flagship smartphone in 2017 has. So we have fantastic battery life, pretty decent specifications, and it's actually not very expensive either. The only problem is, aside from its brave design, it's a little bit too chunky to recommend to the average person. The Samsung Galaxy Note 8 is a really good phone in a lot of ways, but when people ask me if they should buy one, it is far from the first phone I recommend. And the main reason for that is battery life. It doesn't last nearly as long as the Galaxy S8 Plus, and whilst this does have a dual camera and an S Pen on top of that, I didn't find myself using the S Pen very much, and the dual camera is very fiddly. It doesn't help that it's one of the most expensive phones of the year, and I would say if you're a Note enthusiast, go for it. But if you're not, it's a very tough sell over the S8 Plus. The Mi Mix 2 by Xiaomi was a smartphone I was seriously excited to try. After all, the original Mi Mix did something really great. The problem came for 2 reasons. First of all, the Mi Mix 2 actually has a lower screen-to-body ratio than the original Mi Mix, and considering a lot of the hype about the original smartphone was based off this statistic, that is one way to really kill the hype. On top of that, the competitors got really good, really fast. You may have seen phones like the Doogee Mix, like the Maze Alpha. These phones just popped out of nowhere sporting near bezel-less designs for a fraction of the price. So the Mix 2 ended up being impressive, but at the same time a little bit underwhelming. Now, I'm not against iPhones at all. I actually think the iPhone 8, 8 Plus and the iPhone 10 all deserve a place in this list. What I would say about the iPhone 10 though, is it feels a little bit like a first-gen product. Whilst, of course, a lot of this innovation was made to make our lives easier, it actually feels a lot more effortful. There's a lot more stretching, for example to reach the control center, and there's also a lot more swiping. The whole thing is gesture-based, which actually feels just a little bit more effort-inducing than the previous home button that it's replacing. Obviously, the iPhone 10 does a lot of things right as well. It's one of the most powerful smartphones out there, and it is built like an absolute tank. You may have seen a video I did not too long ago, where I dropped this thing out of a helicopter, and it was damaged, but it survived. The iPhone 8 and 8 Plus are very consolidated bits of hardware and software. But unfortunately, in 2017, I just don't think that's enough. I think the main problem I have with the 8 and the 8 Plus is just the form factor. These gigantic bezels on the top, bottom and either side that, to be honest, side by side with most 2017 phones, make it look like something out of an antique shop. Even the OnePlus 5, a much cheaper phone, just about got away with a 73% screen-to-body ratio. And here the 2 iPhones are, sitting there stubbornly with about 65. It also counts to their detriment that the battery lives on the iPhone 8 and the 8 Plus especially are just not really very good. In my side-by-side comparisons, these would always be the first phones to run out and the last phones to charge. The LG V30 did a lot of things well. It's a phone that ticks a lot of boxes, and that hi-fi chip inside of it is possibly the best audio setup we've seen on a phone thus far. However, it's really let down in a few key areas. The rear camera doesn't cope very well with low light, and the front camera just lacks a little bit of sharpness. On top of that, the OLED display, the core interaction between the user and the smartphone, is just not that great, and a lot of users have even reported uneven levels of brightness across the screen. And then we've got the Nokia 8, a phone that feels nice to hold in the hands. The screen is pleasant to use, but unfortunately it just feels a little bit late to the game. The phone completely matches all of its competitors on paper, but it doesn't really bring anything new to the table. The camera is okay, the screen is okay, the performance is okay, and unfortunately, considering how competitive this market is, that just isn't enough. Now, given that we were just talking about the Doogee Mix, and given how much of a media storm this thing has brewed up, it is definitely worth a mention. This is a $150 budget bezel-less smartphone, and it has an AMOLED display up front. And on first inspection, it's pretty good. You'll be impressed by the build quality, you'll be impressed by the display, as well as the form factor. But after using the phone for a bit, you'll grow pretty tired of the clunky UI, the fake dual camera, as well as the poor battery life. So while that will not be in the top 20, what will is this. This is the Digi S2, a phone you may not have heard of unless you've seen my video, and I was thoroughly impressed with it. It's not a perfect smartphone, but you'll come to love the build quality, the dual cameras, and the 18:9 aspect ratio display. The Huawei P10 released at the beginning of this year really impressed me. The dual camera on offer here is a partnership with LeEco and pretty much produces instantly Instagram ready photos. On top of that, the phone has a really solid, really compact feeling to it, and it's got some interesting color variations. Also, the hyper diamond cut rear of the smartphone is one of the most inspired finishes to date. It is maybe the best balance of something that is practical, doesn't attract too many fingerprints, is very grippy, but also something that just looks good. It feels premium and is made of top-notch materials. The recently announced Razer phone very nearly made it onto the top 5. The reason it didn't though is because it's basically based off the Nextbit Robin in terms of design, and that was a 2016 smartphone. And whilst that room has been used well to create these really powerful speakers, unfortunately I don't think speakers are as important as display, so it just looks a little bit dated in my opinion. Also, because this smartphone is a gaming-centric device, as you can imagine, camera sort of took the backstage a little bit, and compared to the competition, it doesn't hold up too well. The OnePlus 5 is amazing value for money, and if it weren't for those thick bezels on the front of the phone, would be a basically perfect balance of price to performance. And this phone would have definitely made the top 5 smartphones on the list if it weren't for the exactly same price but better OnePlus 5T. And then we've got two phones you may not have actually considered, the Xiaomi Mi 6 and the Xiaomi Mi Note 3, which in a similar vein to OnePlus offer really good price to performance ratios, premium build quality, and lots of really high-end features such as dual cameras. The problem though is that whereas OnePlus has very well adapted to Western markets, Xiaomi slightly less so. Depending on where you end up buying your smartphones, a big part of the user interface may well be in Chinese. Your keyboard may well be in Chinese, and for most of these phones, you will actually have to sideload the Play Store using a third-party workaround. The next phone is the admittedly pretty poorly named LeEco Le S3, and this was so close to making the top 5, because for $250, it is really the full package. You've got a 2K display, a 4000 mAh battery, and a 21 megapixel camera. And I actually labeled this as the best budget bezel-less smartphone of 2017. So if that is specifically what you are looking for, the LeEco Le S3 has probably got you covered. Alright, so you're probably thinking, if none of those phones that we just mentioned made the top 5, then which ones did? In 5th place, we have the Huawei Mate 10 Pro, and this is world's first AI-powered smartphone. And whilst the artificial intelligence itself might be a little bit more subtle than the company's marketing might suggest, this is one very smart phone. It can auto-defragment itself to keep it fast over time. It can identify the kind of objects you're shooting and adjust your settings accordingly. Lots of subtle things like that, which you only notice if you spend a bit of time with the phone. The weakest point of the device is probably its 1080p display, but even then, it's going to be one of the best 1080p displays you've seen. It's got an 18:9 aspect ratio, OLED display for super rich colors, it looks fantastic. And on top of that, the camera, the battery life, and the performance are absolutely top notch. Number 4 is the one and only Samsung Galaxy S8 Plus, a smartphone that handles all the fundamentals really well, but also adds a touch of class. We've got a 3D touch home button, a glass and aluminium design which does look really good and feels really solid, and also one of the best cameras to date on a phone. And in terms of value for money, compared to the Galaxy Note 8, I would definitely say the S8 Plus is better. You should be able to find it for about $200 less, and you're also getting much better battery life with this. Number 3 is the LeEco Le S3 X626. Horrible naming convention aside, this is staggering value for a smartphone. If you search around, you can get this guy for $100. $100! And you're getting 4K video recording, a 21 megapixel camera, a deca-core CPU, and a 1080p display. And honestly, this is probably not a smartphone you expected to see on a list like this. It's not a smartphone that I would normally put on a list like this, but it is insanely good value. So check it out, I did do a dedicated video on that, so if you did miss that, I'll link it up as a card. Number 2 is the Google Pixel 2 XL. And this is a controversial phone. It's a phone that's had a lot of reports about it, a lot of issues with the screen especially, but honestly I've been using this phone as my main device for about 3 to 4 weeks now, and yes, you will notice it to begin with, but after a period of time, you move past that and you just start to appreciate all the amazing software inside of this. The kind of software that allows you to take portrait mode photos with a single camera, the amazing software that then allows you to do the same thing with your front camera, the software that allows your phone to listen to the ambient music around you, tell you what song is playing when your screen is off, even when you've got no data. The Pixel 2 XL is a phone that constantly surprises you. It is a phone that is presenting Android in the way that Google wants users to use it, and that is a good thing. And just to round the package off, it's got dual front-facing stereo speakers, it's got the latest and greatest in processing power, and also a 6-inch 2K display. Alright, and that leaves us with one more smartphone. And you probably guessed it by now, that is the OnePlus 5T. This is a phone that has improved on two of the weakest areas of the OnePlus 5, which were already pretty strong, and that is display and camera, and it has managed to do that while keeping exactly the same price. This thing stands toe to toe with the very best phones out there, and when you're using it, a lot of people will actually say it's faster, it's snappier, the screen looks better, and yet it is in some cases half the price. So guys, I really hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, be sure to smash that subscribe button, that would really mean a lot to me. My name is Aaron, this is Mr. Who's the Boss, and I'm signing out.